If you didn't already know, that's a style of music called a chiptune. And that song was composed by my guest today, Matt Lister, a.k.a. Cobra Commander. He joins us today to talk about chiptunes, retrocomputing, Atari 2600 game development, a little bit of classic G.I. Joe and Transformers chat and trivia, and a lot more.
Shall we play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky in Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for tuning in. And speaking of tuning in, this week is really cool. Even though the show is called Shane Plays Geek Talk, it's not just about playing games. Shane Plays is when I play, when I geek out, and I talk about things that interest me or that I have fun with, not just games. I mean, we might talk comic books, games, movies, TV shows, anything geeky. If it's geeky, it goes. And this week, I've got a topic and a guest that I've been wanting to do a show on this quite a while, because it kind of touches on two things that are close to my heart. One is retro computing, and two is retro gaming. But it's about making music with that old hardware, or specifically with hardware, not just emulators, that sounds retro. It's called chiptunes. You may have heard of it. And if you heard of it, you're going to learn more about it today. And if you haven't heard of it, then good for you, because you're about to be introduced to a cool new thing. And my guest is Matt Lister, a.k.a. Cobra Commander, who is a musician, but is also into retro computing and into chiptunes. And I'm just really excited to talk about this. So Matt, a.k.a. Cobra Commander, CC, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. So I got to ask you a trivia question. So
Sure.
There was a Transformers episode set in the future that Cobra Commander guest starred in. Do you remember what his name was in that?
I don't.
Old Snake. Old Snake.
It's very inventive. Yeah. Well, it's the future. He's old now, so he's Old Snake.
They never call him Cobra Commander, but it's totally obvious from the voice and the helmet and
right.
shadowy gun runner. Yeah.
I don't know if I've seen this.
Yeah, it's in the third season of Transformers. The third season is where after the animated movie came out and it jumped into the future and you had different Transformers and all. And speaking of, I think the 35th anniversary of the Transformers animated movie just happened. So,
my God,
yeah.
That's how old I am.
Yeah, I saw that in the theater, baby. So,
I probably saw that. I just don't remember. I don't remember it.
Yeah, I'm a big Generation 1 Transformers fan.
Yeah.
That's one of my major pillars of geekdom. So are you just a Cobra
stuff.
Commander nut, or are you a G.I. Joe nut?
I really like G.I. Joe. Yeah, sure. I have all of the episodes. Some of them are great. Some not so much. There's, of course, the PSAs that are just absolutely iconic, that got a, kind of a resurgence when they got spoofed in the 2000s.
Oh, those were so funny.
Those were so good.
There's some videos, and we're not here talking about G.I. Joe, but let's tangent a little bit.
Sure.
My friend Keith showed me some stuff on YouTube that I literally was going to pass out laughing. It was like where they took clips from the G.I. Joe PSAs. This is probably what you're talking about. Yeah. And they dubbed them with just ridiculous stuff, and it was so funny.
I mean, that was
absolutely,
that's just one of the earliest things I ever saw on the internet, because
so funny.
You had that predates YouTube, I want to say. They put them up, you had to download them,
Well, you go to like E-Bombs World, or you'd go to
or something like that. And oh my God! And then Hasbro sent them a cease and desist.
Did they really? They should have, because it keeps. Anyway, I think legally they kind of have to protect that. If they don't attack it then they can't attack something else later. So
I totally understand why they did
but
it.
still, those were so funny, dude.
It's so good.
I was gonna pass out laughing. I really was. They're just bizarre. But anyway, okay. So G.I. Joe, the G.I. Joe, the mainstay of my afternoon cartoons, but Transformers was my big one. But usually they ran Transformers and G.I. Joe in the same hour, right? One would follow the other, so I'd watch both. And I like G.I. Joe. I mean, I'm a fan. If I could have a real life HISS tank, I don't, that would be just, rolling to work in a HISS tank. Right?
I mean, why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? Right? So, and of course, I know some toy collectors, and was it the USS Flag, the big aircraft carrier? That's like the holy grail.
I believe so. I never had that toy.
No, nobody did. I mean, you had to be rich to have that thing. Yeah,
rich kids had.
Yeah, it was a full-on aircraft carrier. Anyway, okay. So your handle is Cobra Commander. I'll link your YouTube channel in the show notes. People can always go to shaneplays.com and go to the show notes for any show. But you have a YouTube channel, and on this channel, many of your videos, you're literally in the Cobra Commander mask, like doing helmet. Where did you get this thing?
Etsy. There are people who make the helmet.
Yeah.
So, and it's pricey.
Do you feel sleazy yet powerful when you wear the helmet?
I don't know. It's just, I mean, it's interesting just because it's mirror plated.
Yeah.
So you see out of it, but all anyone sees
is
is their own reflection.
Well, Cobra Commander is a great design. I mean,
it's really cool.
Yeah, I love Cobra Commander. I actually felt bad for Cobra Commander in the G.I. Joe movie when Serpentor ousted him, and he got like turned into a snake literally, and he's like snaking around. So I love that. I love the weaselly bad guy, like Cobra Commander and Starscream. Oh my goodness, I love that. In fact, I think it was the same voice.
Same guy.
Yeah, same voice.
It's the same guy who voiced
that sniveling, sleazy, yet somehow effective villain is, it warms my heart. So
yeah. Well, the voice actor who did work for that was just so good. Just that rasp.
Yeah.
His voice is.
Yeah.
No doubt. You can hear it in both characters, and it just hasn't been replicated, I think.
Well, and the trivia that so in the animated movie for Transformers in 85, I think, 84, 86, I think 86. Yeah, it's 35th anniversary. So they killed Optimus Prime, and it like devastated little boys everywhere, right? Like there's this this kid locked himself in the bathroom and wouldn't come out. So because at the time they just wanted to use the movie to get a whole new line of toys out, like a whole new, and they didn't realize the importance of these characters. So they were even going to do at one time a scene where there's a charge of the Light Brigade where all the G1 Transformers just got wiped out. So after that happened, originally was it Duke or Hawk in the animated movie, the G.I. Joe movie that goes into a coma at the end?
I think it's Duke.
Duke, yeah. They were going to kill him. He was supposed to die. And then after that, the Optimus Prime backlash, they just suddenly, he's dead. I mean, they killed him, but they add this throwaway line in the movie, like, oh, he's just in a coma. So anyway, there you go.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that they changed their mind.
Oh yeah, no, they were gonna kill Duke. No, Duke was hamburger, man. And then yeah, they didn't realize how much people were getting into these characters. They just see this is to sell toys. So anyway,
it's true though. I mean, when they killed Optimus Prime, I remember thinking like, who is this Rodimus Prime?
It took me years to get used to the new status quo. In fact, I liked the movie as far as the animation quality, but I disliked that jump they did into the third season, where suddenly it's in the future and there's all these different Transformers. It took me years to come to appreciate that. Okay, yeah, I do like this stuff, but I was such a hardcore, that the status quo, and then they just suddenly changed it. So, but I think the animated movie for Transformers is amazing. It's one of the best animated movies out there now. It just took me a long time to get my head around it. But anyway, all right. So we're now here to talk about G.I. Joe and Transformers. So
I could talk about it
but speaking of selling toys and stuff, and I know that there are people who take chiptunes very seriously, and the hardware is not considered toys, but it's fun to play with. So,
for sure,
that is a very clunky segue to get us over to chiptunes. So, so let's talk about chiptunes. So what I'm going to give you the Wikipedia definition of chiptune, okay? And then I want you as a musician to tell me what you feel a chiptune is, okay? Is that fair?
Yeah, sure.
So this is from Wikipedia, which I'll also link on the show notes at shaneplays.com. Chiptune, also known as chip music, is a style of synthesized electronic music made using the programmable sound generator, or PSG, sound chips, or synthesizers in vintage arcade machines, computers, and video game consoles. The term is commonly used to refer to tracker format music, which intentionally sounds similar to older PSG created music. This is the original meaning of the term, as well as music that combines PSG sounds with modern musical styles. It has been described as an interpretation of many genres, since any existing song can be arranged in chiptune style, defined more by choice of instrument and timbre than specific style elements. So if a professor was in front of a classroom, that's what he would tell me. Okay? But there's book learning, and then there's real life learning. So what is chiptunes?
I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, it's tunes made by chips. I mean, it's sort of, I think it isn't limited. I don't think you have to get the old hardware to make it. If you can find something that sounds similar or has the same vibe, I think that's fine. I mean, everybody who makes chiptunes, for the most part, uses a modern digital audio workstation to render everything down and mix it.
So let me note you on that real quick. By digital audio workstation, is that software running on a PC?
Yeah.
Or is that some? Okay.
Yeah, like
so an emulator is acceptable.
I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, if you have a VST plugin that emulates those chip sounds and that's how you make chiptunes, I think that's valid too. I don't think, or you use all samples. I think that's valid too. I mean, I use all original hardware because I very much enjoy working with it. But,
you're also into retrocomputing like I am.
Yeah.
So you like owning and playing with and learning the original hardware. Same as me. I've got a whole, collection of retro computers. So like I know that you just recently bought a TI-99 4A and have been playing with a speed synthesizer. So
I love that speed synthesizer.
And that's me and you. Like I am not a musician. I played around with GarageBand in Mac and played a little bit of music, but beyond that, I'm not a musician. I know nothing about this stuff. But we're both retrocomputing nerds, so without a doubt, yeah.
Yeah, the speech synthesizer on that is awesome, and the homebrew community for the TI-99 is nothing short of amazing. There's a guy who made a tracker for the speech synthesizer so that the computer can sing pitches and words. Pitches and words. So there's a great YouTube video. I think this guy's name is Pixel Pedant or something like that. But if you look up like TI-99 singing computer or something, he has a thing where he demonstrates his tracker. And he does the Muppets song on it. It's it's time to hit amazing. Absolutely amazing. What people have done.
And that's Pixel Pedant, you think?
I could be wrong about that. I'm pretty sure that's the guy. Could be confusing him with another home brewer, but I'm pretty sure that's the guy.
Well, let me ask you this real quick before I forget, if you don't mind, because it's come up a couple of times, and there's probably people going, "What are they talking about?" What is a tracker?
It's just a really old school way of making music where you kind of have you're kind of making music in these segments, and these segments have some sort of like note division where it's like, okay, everything in this row is 16th notes or something, and you kind of enter in the notes in each channel, kind of in these segments, and then you piece it all together, and it'll play a tune. And I use a lot of trackers on a lot of different hardware. They all pretty much function in that you're building these segments and then piecing them together.
Well, now some of your videos, like you've got a video on your channel that says writing an album on my Game Boy during my lunch. That looks like a tracker to me.
Yeah, that's LSDJ. Okay. That's probably the most common tracker, the one that's the most popular, because it is a Game Boy ROM. If you want, you can just play it on an emulator on your PC. It'll work just fine. The sound will be pretty darn close too. I have to say the emulation has gotten really good. And yeah, that's just probably the most common tracker, just the most used tracker, because you put it in a Game Boy and suddenly your Game Boy is a all-in-one.
How many track? So like a track, if I'm understanding right, is you can have up to, it looks like this tracker, you can have up to 4 tracks playing at the same time.
Yeah,
right? Okay.
For the Game Boy, yeah, the Game Boy is 2 pulse wave channels. So
that sounds so. Say that again. That sounded really cool.
2 pulse wave generators.
Oh man, it's like Doctor Who reversing the polarity. I love it. It's a pulse wave channel. Yes, go for it.
And then you have a wave channel and you have a noise channel. So, and there's a lot you can do with that. There's a lot you can do. You can have the noise channel is usually the drums, usually the snare and hi-hat sounds. Wave channel is really versatile. You can have that be a lead. You can make a really rad sounding kick drum with the wave channel. And then the square waves are the classic Nintendo sound. Everybody knows that sound of that kind of square wave, really basic synthesizer sound. But you can also like add a sweep to it and make a bass drum. There's so many things you can do with it. You can arpeggiate the notes very rapidly so that you can kind of fit in chords that way, because there's a problem with polyphony, playing more than one note at a time. The way you can get around that is by using a command that makes it so that it rapidly goes back and forth between 2 notes, so you can kind of fit in chords that way. It's kind of crazy all the things people have done to kind of get around the limitations.
Right. Necessity's the mother of invention. Right.
Yeah. Really amazing stuff. And LSDJ is practically an institution by now. I want to say it was invented.
LSDJ. Do you know what that stands for?
Little Sound DJ.
LSDJ. I'm going to make a note. Okay. Does that only run on Game Boy, or does that work on other hardware?
Yeah, it's a Game Boy. You could get it to run on something that emulates a Game Boy, but it's a very much Game Boy specific. Yeah.
Well, I see it looks to me like you've got a couple of different videos on your channel. One of them is LSDJ is running on an emulator, and another one it looks like it's running on Game Boy, like an actual Game Boy.
Oh, there's no emulators on my channel. That's
not. Is that the actual Super Game Boy up there?
Yeah, and it probably looks really nice because I captured it on my Elgato HD capture card, so it looks Yeah, it's got a 16:9 ratio, but trust me, that's not how yeah. To record it, I often use sometimes I use the Game Boy, but to record it, I often use something called the Super Game Boy, which is, it's so cool. It's this cartridge that plugs into a Super Nintendo. And what you do is you plug another cartridge into it, another Game Boy cartridge into it. So
you plug into the Nintendo and then you plug into that.
Yeah, I take the Game Boy cartridge, put it in the Super Game Boy, put it in the Super Nintendo.
So it's like Russian dolls. Okay, got it.
It's chiptune inception. You have cartridges inside other cartridges. Yeah,
I love it. Cool. So what is Sid Wizard? You've got a link up here that says my first Sid Wizard track.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I started doing stuff with Sid Wizard, inspired heavily by one of my favorite chiptune artists, Luke Hash.
Luke
Hash.
Hash.
Lukhash, I think is how you spell his name. And he's a chip wave guy. He does synthwave, which is a genre of kind of 80s influenced electronic music, and but he is an absolute wizard with the Commodore 64. So he always throws in like Commodore 64 stuff in his albums, and he recently came out with an album that's pure chiptune, no signal processing, no nothing, just all made with Sid Wizard, just the three tracks.
Is that on? Is that Sid Wizard? Is that running on Commodore 64? Is that?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, it's very much running on Commodore 64. But actually, I cheat a little bit. I actually make all of my Sid Wizard stuff on. It's called the C64. It's it's one of those like system on a chip kind of things. Like I make all my tracks on that because that boots up instantly.
So it's like a Raspberry Pi, but instead it's a Commodore 64. And you plug it into USB or something.
It's emulation of some sort, but it gets really close. But then when I record it, I always go to my Commodore 64 because it sounds way better, and it sounds way dirtier. And also, I have to say, as close as the emulation has gotten, the filters on the SID chip, I have 4 different 6581s, the original SID chip. All of them sound different. All of the filters on them sound different. They're very unpredictable. I don't know why that is. So sometimes I'll swap them out just to see, what each one sounds like. And then I have the SID chip 8580, which also has a different sound. So you really never know what you're going to get. You can as soon as you mess with the filter in the emulation, I've noticed that you're going to get something that's going to sound different when you put it in the Commodore 64. So a bit of an element of surprise.
Yeah, you never quite know what you're going to get.
But I would run Sid Wizard on my Commodore 64, but there's a slight problem, and people have talked about it in the chiptune forums. If you're in a PAL region, it runs great.
Right.
If you're in NTSC, the screen's cut off, which is weird because it actually will change. The program's good about, this is all homebrew stuff. It's like one person working on it. So, if there's bugs, go fix it yourself. I mean, you're not going to find any other version.
I mean, it's kind of a do-it-yourself community, I'm sure. So, but just so that, because you and I know what PAL and NTSC is, and a lot of other people do, but just in case people don't.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just spit out lots of terms.
Yeah, just so back in the day, and I guess to a lesser extent, maybe it's still like this, but the old CRT TVs, PAL was the European format, and NTSC was the American format. And a PAL picture would not fit completely on an NTSC format because it was more higher resolution or more resolution or something. So I actually had, when I lived in England with the Air Force, I had a TV that could switch. It was an NTSC and,
that's so cool.
Yeah, but when I came, it broke on the way back. It got broke in the which sucks because, like, you know, if you're
it's gonna be coveted now, like for retro gamers.
Well, not just retro gamers, but if you're into collecting physical media for DVDs and stuff like that, you know, like you can only get this version of the movie in PAL, you know, or this region. So in that, there's a whole subculture there too on collecting physical media for movies, and like the 8 different versions of a movie and which one you want and all that stuff. And I'm kind of into that, but not anywhere near as deep as the rabbit hole goes. I do like to collect physical media though. Okay, anyway, so let's go back to the musician stuff. Now, it's obvious from talking to you, Mr. Commander, that you have a musical background, education, when you're talking, you're like the polyphony and this and that and the other and the blah blah blah. So let's rewind a little bit. Let's do the little doo-doo-doo, the wavy lines and the screen goes hazy. Let's go back a little bit. So before you ever got into chiptunes or whatever, you tell us a little bit about your musical background, because that is your vocation. Right. So tell us about your musical background, and then we'll figure out how you got into chiptunes.
Yeah, sure. On my 12th birthday, I received a guitar.
Did you play it till your fingers bled?
I did. Yeah. Thanks for the Bryan Adams reference. Yeah, and I got really into it. So when it came time to go off to college, it's like, okay, what are you going to study? I wanted to study music, so I got a degree in music performance for the classical guitar from the University of New Hampshire, and I've been teaching and gigging in New Hampshire and the New England, since 2001. So,
okay, I got to ask, when you show up to teach, do you have your Cobra Commander helmet on?
No, I think very few of my classical guitar students even know I have that channel.
That you are Cobra Commander.
That's kind of intentional. Sure. I sort of wanted to keep that kind of side hobby separate from my main career, so you would never know it's me if you go to my other YouTube channel where it's all my classical guitar and ukulele.
Well, that's the other thing. You've got some albums out there, right? How do people find that stuff?
You can just search for my name, Matthew Lister, and then you'd have to put guitar, because there's another much more famous Matthew Lister who is I want to say he's Olympic, I think, canoe or something. I don't know. He's a boater.
How dare he exist? Yeah.
I wish people would confuse him for me, because he's really cut.
Yeah.
And has huge muscles because he uses them to row a boat.
Because he's a world-class canoeer. So it's Matthew Lister.
I've decided.
Lister guitar.
Like Listerine without the "ine."
Yeah. So, and I've listened to some of your guitar music, and it's quite good. So now it's obvious that, like, the guitar is your main instrument, like you teach, but you just talking to you over the time that I've known you, I mean, you have a very wide and deep understanding of musical theory and instruments. I got to know, have you ever rocked out on a theremin?
No, but I'd love to. We the music shop I teach out of actually got a theremin in, and they're cool, but I mean, that would take some serious practice to get good at.
All right, so
it's because
they're so cool. They're like the '60s 98% of 60s science fiction had a theremin.
It really did.
Yeah.
I mean, just because it's got that amazing vibrato.
Right. Yeah. It's
vibrato.
And it does sound otherworldly. It's just very.
It really does.
So you never actually touch it, right? You just sort of manipulate your fingers in between something.
I guess. I'm not entirely sure. All I know is I watched someone try and fail to play said theremin. I think it's tough because I guess there's a feel aspect. I can kind of see if you play a guitar, you can kind of see, if your hands behind your fingers behind the right fret or whatever. I think the theremin it's a little more tricky to get the pitch that you're going for. So.
All right. So the theremin, I've always wanted to play a theremin just because they're so in pop culture. What is that sound? And and there's probably people out there that play the theremin and take it very seriously. So I'm not knocking the theremin. Just the space it occupies in my brain is that anytime you need a weird sci-fi sound, you go to the theremin. So what is it? I'm looking at your channel. What is an artiphon or an artiphone?
Oh, artiphone.
Is that like it looks like
they're a company.
Yeah.
And it's funny that I called that the artiphone for the longest time, but it's actually called the Instrument One because they make other instruments.
So the company is Artiphone.
The company is Artiphone, but I just ended up just calling it an artiphone, and that works, right? You can call something a Fender. I don't know.
It's like like a guitar. So. Well, like I like to say in the South, I don't know how it is up in the North. Say you want a Coke? Yeah. What kind? Pepsi. So Coke is just sort of.
Oh, that's interesting.
Now my grandparents who lived up north for a while, they called it pop. So,
right. Right. I've heard that before. Yeah.
So the Artiphone Instrument One just looks like a half remote control, half guitar neck with no string.
Right.
Yeah. So what is this?
Somebody else I heard. Somebody I think asked me, was like, "Are you playing with a 2x4 or something?" But it's a way of controlling MIDI. It does a lot more too that I haven't really dived into because I just found what works for me and just kind of went with it. But it's basically it's a way of controlling MIDI that. For me as a guitar player, I had to take a year of functional piano as part of my major in college, and I was not good. I was not good at it. So, all these synthesizers and things that I have, and old video game consoles that have MIDI interfaces, most people would use a piano to control that. But when I found the Artiphone, I saw that, you can set it to a lot of things. You can set it to be like a violin, set it to be like a cello, set it to be like a ukulele. I set it to guitar, and it ended up just working great. I felt like the ideas that I had on guitar could be translated, and that's how I think anyway.
Right.
Because that's my main instrument.
Well, all your muscle memory is in guitar too, right? I mean,
and there's that as well, all that stuff. And I just found that, as soon as I could manipulate these old consoles and old computers and old hardware with the Artiphone, I just felt my ideas could come out much more naturally.
So, and I'd say that's important in music. It's like, like in Harry Potter, you got to pick the right wand. And I mean, I think, because music is a very, it's mathematical, but it's also very emotional and passionate. And you need the instrument that you feel like you have the least amount of resistance between you and the instrument, right? I mean, you want to flow, right? So that's cool. So let you bring up a point I was going to ask about anyway. So if I understand chiptune and MIDI correctly, chiptune and MIDI are two different things, because MIDI is like pre-recorded sounds right? I mean,
no,
is it not?
MIDI,
Okay.
MIDI, it stands for something. I'm going to completely blank on what that is.
Yeah,
But
I'll look
what
it up real quick.
MIDI was a method devised in the early 80s to get various electronic gear talking with each other. So if you had a drum machine, you could sync like a sequencer or a sampler to it so that it would have the same clock that the drum machine, it would run off the same clock as the drum machine, not its internal clock, something like that. So it would keep the other instruments it's trying to talk to in time. And also as a way to also send pitch and velocity to instruments, so you could trigger sounds and get the pitch you want, and also get the velocity, the volume of the note to be what you wanted it to be. And we still use the same standard today. It's an 8-bit technology, I want to say, to this day, and it's still the standard.
I've always misunderstood MIDI. Then I thought it was like that. There was a chip or something that had all these sounds pre-recorded.
Yeah. So the sound is actually being generated by the hardware when you send out a MIDI.
So MIDI is chiptune then, or can be.
It can be, but MIDI, you can also use it to control modern hardware. That's the interesting thing, is that it's been around since the early 80s. And I can send it out to a modern keyboard. I have what's my most modern keyboard in here? Oh God, it's all old stuff. I have a microKORG. You can still buy those. And you can send MIDI to it. You can send MIDI. So a common thing for me to do with MIDI is to hook up my gear to my computer running the digital audio workstation. It'll send MIDI messages to all my different gear. So I can write a tune. I don't have to live play all of the instruments. I can write a tune in MIDI on the computer, and then just you hit play, and it'll send the MIDI messages to all of the various gear, and then I have that plugged into my audio interface, and I record it all, and that's a really common way to make music these days. So yeah, MIDI
that's one of the reasons I like to do these shows, is to learn something new. Yeah, I mean, I've been looking at Wikipedia and MIDI.org and all that while we've been talking, and yeah, it's first and foremost a digital operability format. So.
Right.
Very cool. So I just remember in the 90s, in the late 80s and in the 90s, everything was MIDI. People were talking about MIDI.
Caught on.
Yeah, and I remember some games, some computer games, like you could, if you don't have your Sound Blaster, then your Sound Blaster card, then you use the MIDI, and I just remember stuff like, and it would sound different. So. But anyway, yeah. All right. So MIDI does play into chiptune, and it can.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I use it less and less these days because I use mostly trackers now, because I very much want to make code that might be usable in a game, and trackers can often export. Code.
Yeah, because you're not only learning how to use retro hardware, you're playing in a lot of areas that are cool. You're also learning how to make a game on the Atari VCS.
Trying to. I took a course.
Chasing the beam. Tell us about that.
Racing the beam. God.
Yes.
Well, I'm not good at it yet,
yeah.
but I have made graphics and like playable games that are horrible. But I did take a course. A friend of mine bought me a course on Udemy to make Atari 2600 games, and I got this email, and I'm like, I was like, oh, thank you. At the time, I was kind of like, who has the time to do this stuff? There's no way that this is gonna work for me. Maybe I'll check it out, but probably not.
Right.
And then the pandemic hit, and I had a
Yeah.
lot of extra free time. So I took this course, and it was absolutely amazing. And now I'm really into it, but it's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, right off the bat, like you have to, and again, this gets into region differences, but you have to set up your scan lines for a CRT TV. So, like right off the bat, you have to clean the memory. Yeah, that's the first thing you do, pretty much.
Like on every refresh.
When it restarts, because I guess the Atari 2600, it doesn't even clear out the memory when you turn it off and on. Whatever you have from the previous game.
So let's talk a little bit about so in an old CRT monitor, there was, for the benefit of the listeners, I know you know this, I think they called it a photon gun.
Right, electron beam.
An electron beam. So you have the photon gun, or whatever you want to call it, and it would literally shoot a beam along the top, across the top of the monitor. Then it would drop down to the next line and shoot a beam, and then go down to the next line and shoot a beam, and it would literally sort of paint the picture. And then it would start over, and it would do that however many times a second.
And you have to write that into your code.
Right.
For an Atari 2600 game. You have to output 3 lines of vertical sync. And then you have to output 37 scan lines of vertical blank. So that's like the blank portion of your screen before your visible scan lines.
So is this what the chasing the beam is referring to?
Yeah, because then after you do the vertical blank, you have to output 192 lines, your visible scan lines, which they call the kernel. Different meaning in other computing areas, but with Atari, your 192 visible scan lines is the kernel. And then at the very end, you put your overscan, which is 30 more lines of vertical blank. And that's every frame. And that's why a lot of games aren't scrolling. That's why, you kind of got this one frame.
The static screen, like a maze or something.
But you can kind of simulate scrolling. I know River Raid does it by having it be like procedurally generated terrain. So you can kind of simulate scrolling that way. And then there's Pitfall, where when you go off the screen, it just redraws a new screen entirely.
That's the main scrolling example I can think of from Atari is Pitfall.
Right. There were ways around it.
Dropped. Man, Pitfall was a huge game when it dropped. And that was, I loved that game.
The best of its time. I mean, it took David Crane 1,000 hours to program that game. I mean, it's crazy all the stuff that he had to do to get around the limitations.
Yeah, right. You have to get very inventive. But yeah, I think I've shared this on the show before, but me and my brother, when we played Pitfall, when Pitfall Harry and swings across, and it goes da 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 da, and he jumps across the crocodile water or whatever.
Right.
We always said that sounds like cold beers to you. Cold beers. So, anyway, all right.
I can hear it.
Yeah. So we were talking recently, you and I were on a game night that I guess Yars Revenge used some pretty interesting tricks to come up with that sort of force field effect.
Right.
Yeah.
I wish I had my book Racing the Beam with me, because it talks. Racing the Beam is a great book too. If anybody wants to get into the history of the Atari 2600 and the way it does it is like they do kind of these case studies on these different games, and one of them was Yars Revenge. And I'm gonna botch how it works so hard, but the that little force field in the middle of the screen where you have a homing missile that chases you the entire time, and it's a source of never-ending grief in the game, because you're constantly being chased by this thing, and the higher level you are, the faster the thing gets, right? But there's a force field that makes it so that it can't get you, and it's kind of essential that you use it in some of the higher levels where it still exists, because they just get rid of it altogether in the really high levels. I guess, I hope I'm right about this. I know somebody will correct me, but that force field is kind of streaming just bits of graphics from the game, just randomly kind of streaming in the middle there, or as I understand it, or I should say as I remember it, which might be.
Is it like copying and pasting all these little?
I think it's just somehow snatching just random bits and kind of having it stream through there. I could be wrong about this,
right?
But because this is my memory of reading a book that I read a couple months ago. But yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of tricks in that game that are amazing. The way it kind of stops in between levels, that was like an early pause. That's sort of one of your first uses of a pause feature in an Atari game. Yeah, because it'll stop in between levels. And you got to hit the button to get playing again. So that's kind of a pause. Like you make it to the end of the level, have it stop and go to the bathroom or something.
Oh, here it is. The neutral zone, I think that's the force field, right?
Yeah.
He says that it's actually game code. So you were close. He said,
that's it.
Yeah, I'm on a article on retrovolve.com. It's the actual program code laid out vertically and counter scrolling over each other. So
it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Yeah. It's absolutely amazing. I can't imagine doing that in 650 assembly. Let me tell you, my skills are not there yet.
The designer says he almost had a problem with Atari over it because they felt it was a copyright violation to show the code on the screen. But he explained to them that first, besides the scrolling, there was some X, Y, and random color processing. And second, if somebody could get the code from that, then they deserved it. There's another trick we went into where the neutral zone and the base are never on the screen at the same time. They phase in and out somehow, I guess, to save memory or painting.
Yeah, you can have things flicker.
Yeah, but it's flickering so quickly you can't tell. The human eye
can't tell. And it's a method that a lot of the software engineers use, because I think the Atari 2600 it has registers for player 0, player 1, a missile, and a ball. That's it. That's all you get. That's all you get for stored graphics in the Atari 2600.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, it's like, oh, wow, 2 characters, a missile, and a ball. What does that sound like to you? It sounds like Pong.
Yeah.
And it sounds like combat.
Yeah.
And when I started to do programming for the Atari 2600, it's like, wow, anything that got made for this that isn't Pong or combat is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's nothing but tricks on top of tricks on top of tricks. Yeah.
Yeah, it was all getting around those limitations. Have you ever played? You've played Adventure.
Oh, of course, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? So...
Yeah, there's some kind of trick there with the collision, shoving the sword into the dragon, right?
There's a ton of different tricks in there, and of course it has the video.
It has the very first Easter egg, right?
Easter egg, right? Yeah. But have you noticed something about the character that you control?
I don't know.
So I said that you had graphics for player 0, player 1, ball, and a missile. The character you control, that's the ball.
Yeah, he's just a little dot. He's just a dot. Yeah.
He made that. Okay, you control the ball, and then that frees up the other graphics. You can have more enemies or whatever. But that's how he got around it.
So that's why developers
control the ball.
That's why developers are so important, man. I mean, you ever see that famous clip of Steve Ballmer from Microsoft where he's all sweaty under the armpits and he's jumping around on his stage going developers, trying to pump up the developers?
Okay, now I have to see.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, you got to go look it up.
Developers. developers, 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 developers. Yes!
But you can have the best hardware in the world or the worst hardware in the world, but a good developer can, somebody who's going to sit there and problem solve.
So true. It's so true. There's a guy who has a music channel called Bad Gear, and he takes, like, as he describes it, the world's most hated audio tools. He just finds, like, musical gear that has, like, the lowest reviews, and he always makes a track with it in his videos, and it's always amazing.
Because he's good.
Yeah, you could give this guy 2 rocks and be like, make an album, and he could come up with something.
Beethoven. So well, I know that there's a pretty healthy Atari 2600 coding scene out there. There's homebrew. I mean, you got Apple II, you got people making new games for Commodore and VIC-20 and all that. But just to kind of bring it back into chiptunes, so hardware-wise, tell us what kind of run us through your arsenal of chiptunes hardware.
Oh God, where to start? Okay, start in chronological order. I have an Atari 2600. I also have.
So you do chiptunes on that hardware?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Atari 2600 is pretty bad at doing melodies, but it's great at doing noises.
Yeah, bips and boops. Yeah, it's great at bips and boops.
Absolutely fantastic. So I have an Atari 2600. You could use Slocum Tracker for that. You can look it up. Paul Slocum, really brilliant programmer for the Atari 2600, wrote a web-based tracker. So actually, if you want to try make your own hand at making music on the Atari 2600, there's a Slocum Tracker. And that's super cool because it also outputs a ROM. So I put that on a flash cartridge and I can run it on an original Atari 2600.
Oh, that's
that thing's
pretty
great.
Cool.
But I also have an Arduino based synthesizer.
Tell me, you mentioned this Arduino thing a lot, and I know you have a love-hate relationship with it because it's hard to learn or so. Tell us about this Arduino.
Well,
is this
I just steal other people's code, so I do the hard part.
So what is an Arduino?
So an Arduino is it's a microcontroller. So you can use it to control various, integrated circuitry. So I have a TIA chip, which stands for Television Interface Adapter. And that is the chip on the Atari 2600 that does the video, but it also does the sound. So I have a TIA chip on a solderless breadboard hooked up to an Arduino that...
Oh, keep talking dirty to me, baby.
No, you can...
breadboard hooked up to an Arduino. Keep talking dirty.
Right. It's hooked up to an Arduino with, resistors and jumper wires and everything. And then you plug the USB on the Arduino into your computer, and you can send MIDI signals to the Arduino, and it translates them into something that the TIA understands, and you can use it as a musical instrument.
How do you spell Arduino?
Arduino.
Well, that's how I was going to spell it, but I figured that was too obvious. Arduino. Arduino.
So Atari 2600, moving on up through the years.
Another question on the Arduino is, if somebody wants to get seriously into the hardware side of chiptunes, is an Arduino something they're eventually going to need?
I don't think so, because there's so many trackers that you can use to make playable ROMs on a number of different systems that I wouldn't say it's necessary. But if you want to incorporate it into a live setup, I would say it's super convenient because you have a tiny chip on a tiny board with a tiny microcontroller, and it accepts MIDI messages. So that's would just be so convenient in a live setting. You can just you can have whatever's output.
Now, what do you mean by a live setting? Are you talking about performing?
Yeah,
Okay.
performing.
All right.
I mean, if you're putting this on an album, I mean, yeah, of course you can use it, but I just prefer the trackers just because I love working with them, and if you really want to know the hardware, that is the way to do it. I mean, MIDI is great, but there's all kinds of things you can do with the hardware that the Arduino can pretty much do the same thing. They're both valid.
Okay.
I just prefer the trackers.
Well, I just know you've talked about the Arduino a lot, so I know it's an important.
Yeah, because when I first started, I was like, well, what is this tracker nonsense? All of this stuff is too hard. I don't want to do it. I'm just going to use something I already know, and that's MIDI, and I'm going to make all these little chiptune synths, and that's what I did for a while. But then I started getting into the trackers, and the more I used them, the more I was like, oh, this is just a whole nother level. I think this is how I want to do it. But I still use the MIDI because sometimes I just like jamming out. Like sometimes I want to grab the Artiphone and just play some guitar riffs, but instead of guitar sounds, I want Nintendo sounds or something. So, did you want me to keep going through my hardware?
Okay, so the Arduino.
It's a lot of
now,
stuff.
What's next? What's next after the Arduino?
Okay, I'm trying to do this in chronological order. So then, of course, I have an NES. I have a Famimi MIDI cartridge. It's a hacked cartridge that it's got a MIDI cable sticking out of it, and you can just hook it into your MIDI to USB, hook it into your computer. Bam! Now your computer can make music on the NES. But for the NES these days, I actually do a lot more with FamiTracker, which is a program that makes it makes NES music.
So it's like Little DJ, but for Little Sound DJ, but for
exactly.
NES. Right. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's for NES.
Who is making all this stuff? Is this just people in the community doing homebrew stuff?
Homebrew community. Okay. Can you believe the homebrew community does all of this?
Wow, it's absolutely people get passionate
for free.
Yeah,
for free. It's absolutely amazing. There's just so much. There's so much passion in the community for doing this stuff that somebody actually sat down and wrote a tracker
and then threw it out there and said have fun with it. All right, so the NES,
Sega Master System. That's another one that I made an Arduino synth out of the SN76489, which is the sound chip that's in the Sega Master System. But I also these days I'm much more fond of using a program called Mod to PSG Tracker, which you can make a ROM, and I've had a ROM running in a flash cartridge on the original Sega Master System. Let me see. I have the Sega Genesis. I use a tracker called Def Lamask, but there's a MIDI interface called Gen MDM. That's made by a really well-known professor. I think he's down in Australia, but his handle is Little Scale. And if you do Chiptunes, you probably heard that name before. He's just absolutely brilliant. He's made MIDI interfaces for every Arduino, every old video game console, I should say. He's made MIDI interfaces with Arduino for all that stuff. So the Gen MDM is absolutely amazing. The best part about it is with the really complicated FM synthesis chips that are in the Sega Genesis, there's the chiptune community has gone into the entire library of the Sega Genesis and taken out the presets of the different instruments on every game. There's like 10,000 presets, just thousands of sounds that you can experiment with. You want the bass from Toe Jam and Earl, that can happen, and it's absolutely amazing. And it's like every time I play with it, it's like, oh, it's the sounds of high school kind of.
Right. Yeah.
because that's what I grew up with. Great stuff. I have a Commodore 64. I use the SID chip on that. I have a synth cart that turns it just into a synthesizer. You can play the keyboard like a synthesizer. But I also have something called the Messiah cart that you can plug MIDI into it. You can control it with MIDI. But these days I just use the tracker. I use SID Wizard. It's better than all of that stuff. For me personally, just because of how my brain works.
So it sounds to me like over time you've come to rely more and more on the trackers. When at first you felt the tracker was sort of an impediment, but now you're like, no, this is the best way to go for you. All right.
Yeah. I just because with a tracker you can see the entire score right in front of you, so I can check, the note against note. I can check the counterpoint, check the harmony. It's all laid out right in front of me. With MIDI, it's kind of like I'm clicking into all these little clips, check the notes. Does this line up with that? And what chord am I soloing over here? So just being able to see that all laid out right in front of you is so much. I just find it more convenient. But MIDI's fine. I still use it. So and
okay.
it's fine. But I'm realizing I did not go in chronological order because I missed the Atari 800, and that's the Pokey sound chip. Really amazing chip that has the slight problem of being out of tune at the extreme low and high end of the frequency spectrum. So you have to be careful with that one. Sometimes I hit a note and I'm like, oh, that's out of tune.
Not so good. All right.
What else do I have? Of course, I have the TI-99 4A, which I actually it's got the same sound chip in it as the Sega Master System, so I use it mostly for the speech synthesizer. But both are good. They're great.
Did you say the TI-99 4A and the Sega Master System have the same sound chip?
Have the same sound chip, the SN Texas Instruments SN76489. You would imagine that a Texas Instruments computer would have the Texas Instruments sound chip in it. So,
but no. Yes.
So oddly enough, you can use the same tracker that you use for the Sega Master System, but then you have to use another program to convert it to something TI-99 can read. And then what else do I have? The Game Boy, of course. I have a Nintendo 3DS that has the Korg DS10 or whatever. Turn your Nintendo DS into a synthesizer. That's
when you get into newer hardware, are the capabilities of the sound chips so much better that it's like you're not even really doing chiptunes? Or
that's a great. Well, are you
losing some of that feel? Do you know what I mean?
So why does old video game music sound the way it does? Well, because memory was incredibly expensive.
Right.
So the way you did music was you made hardware that could make sounds, and then the music that it was going to play was just the set of instructions, that it's going to receive. So you can really cut down on the amount of space. That continues for a while, and then slowly, you're able to put MP3s in games. So as soon as you can do that, it's like, well, you can just put, any old track in there,
mm-hmm.
So when I think chiptune, I think of there being limited space and hardware that has to read instructions to make music. So I guess
is it for the NDS, for the DS, is there like a tracker and all that? On the
Korg, Korg, which is a synthesizer company, put out a cartridge that it's absolutely a tracker. It's a tracker, and also it's got all the kind of simulated Korg synthesizer sounds. So that's good fun. I guess that straddles the edge of chiptune, I guess.
Right. Well, I noticed you didn't mention. I know when the Amiga came out.
Yeah, I don't have the Amiga yet. Did you hear about the A500?
I know that they're doing a A500 Mini. Kind of like
doing a Mini.
in that, which is going to have tons of games pre-installed on it. I actually have an Amiga. I have an Amiga 500 and Amiga 2000 as part of my retro collection.
Oh, that's awesome.
Is there? I mean, because I know when the Amiga first came out, people in the know went nuts over its audiovisual capabilities, because at the time they were quite advanced. So, is there a lot of anything in the chiptune scene around the Amigas, or?
Oh, of course. Yeah. No, the Amiga's huge, and the Amiga. I actually watched a video not too long ago. I don't know a ton about the Amiga. I mean, I had a friend that I grew up with that had the Amiga. We played, like Out of This World, and what was that circus game? Oh God, it was like Big Top Freddy or something. I don't know, I forget. But yeah, the Amiga is actually very capable.
Yeah.
But the big computer from that generation, that's really coveted from the 90s is the Atari ST. I want to say
Amiga?
I want to say Fatboy Slim made like that first album with an Atari ST. It's just kind of legendary because of how it handles MIDI. But yeah, Amiga's huge too.
I know, like at the time in the 90s, there were the people who were the Atari ST super fans and the Amiga super fans, but I would have just assumed that the Amiga had better audio hardware in it. But anyway,
I don't own either one, so I'm not entirely sure. But I would say both are very capable systems. I know the Amiga. Had a tracker. I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's still in use. I want to say there are people who have ported this tracker to PC.
Well, back in the day when I had my Amiga in the early 90s, I was doing chiptune music. I didn't even realize it. One of my buddies bought this thing, and I thought it was cool. So you ordered this piece of hardware that you could connect into the Amiga and then use RCA cables to go to like a stereo or something like that. And you could do small samples, and then it had a
you could sample. You could sample with the Amiga. And it was huge for that.
And it had a tracker. I mean, the software was a tracker, and I didn't realize it at the time. But yeah, so I played around back in the 90s doing chiptune music. I didn't even realize it. But anyway, yeah, I have many fond memories of the Amiga. So okay, so tell me. Just this weekend, you said you picked up something for.
Oh God!
Yeah, so tell me about this thing.
Yeah.
What?
I can't believe I'm going to talk about this, but I was teaching out of the music shop I teach out of, and I saw a piece of gear that looks like a Millennium Falcon. It's kind of notorious for being not very good as a musical instrument. So naturally I had to have it. And I got the Casio XW-PD1. I want to say I have those letters right. It's also called the Trackformer. And it is exactly as I described. It is a Millennium Falcon with knobs and pads on it. It has a ton of like classic Casio sounds in it.
I'm looking at it right now. It does look like a Millennium. It looks like a cross between Falcon and the old Simon game.
Yeah,
not Simon. Right, not Simon.
Yes.
It looked like a red telephone. Dang it! What was that? Not Simon. There was another
Merlin, maybe. I don't know.
Merlin, yeah. It looks like a cross between a Millennium Falcon and a Merlin.
Yeah, it definitely looks like something that came out of the Radio Shack in the 80s or something, and slash the Millennium Falcon.
Oh my goodness! So what is this thing? And you're forgetting the big selling point here.
The big selling point has to be the fact that in the side of it, there's a hole for a lanyard.
That is the big seller. Yes, so you can rock this. You can rock this like Flavor Flav rocking his clock.
Oh my God!
Yes.
I can't even imagine, like, you come out on stage.
Rocking this thing.
Why'd he tie a Millennium Falcon knockoff to his neck? Like, So most of my weekend was spent figuring out how this thing works, because the manual that comes with it is notoriously incomprehensible. I would say I would not know any of the functions of this musical instrument if it were not for one guy uploading a video to YouTube explaining how to use it. And he does actually a really good job. It's like 20 minutes, and I felt pretty proficient.
We can besmirch not the Casio Trackformer, because listen, it is a truly portable synthesizer, drum machine, sampler, and sequencer with a lanyard hole. So
it does all of those things very poorly. Yes.
So how do you envision using this in your chiptune artistry?
I'm going to make a video out of it. I already made like a little backing track, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to record it onto my digital audio workstation, and then grab the artiphone and just start soloing some ideas, because I already have like a backing track that I made, and I was like, okay, this is a great basis, because you only get 4 tracks on that thing. So I got drums, bass, and then some nice little accompaniment in there, nice. some nice notes to fill out the chords, and I'm just gonna tinker around with it, because there's not a lot of Trackformer stuff on YouTube. And
have you kind of used it and gone whoosh whoosh and played with it like it's the Millennium Falcon?
I mean, I just start entering codes into it. It's an old code, but you
should fly around and go, "That's no moon." Put it down. And it. But anyway, all right, okay.
So, everything about the design makes no sense.
It's great. I love it. So it really does look like a cross between the Millennium Falcon and the old Merlin game. It really does. Okay, so I got to start moving us towards drawing down here. But so do you have a favorite track that on your like YouTube channel that if you're like, look, if people want to hear what I've done with chiptune, this is my best example?
I would say just click on the last video I uploaded.
The original chiptune for Sega Master System.
Yeah, I did a chiptune kind of in the style of Shinobi and Black Belt and the Ninja and a ton of other Sega Master System games.
What was it you put on Facebook and you were like, "This is my version of metal"?
Oh, I did a metal. That's for my upcoming album.
Okay, so you're working on an album. All right.
Yeah, I'm working on an album of Game Boy tunes, and I'm writing it entirely on my lunch break.
So you're literally sitting there with a physical Game Boy in your hand on your lunch break doing your album.
In my car on my break.
That is too cool. All right.
And I will tweet, like, my track progress.
Right. Well, the metal one sounded good, so all right.
I thought it came out pretty good. With the limitations of the system, I think it sounded heavy. It sounded good. I have some experience of playing metal guitar because I started guitar in the late 80s and early 90s, so that's what everybody played. So yeah.
So what got you into it? At what point did you say I want to play around with this chiptune stuff?
I mean, it was
like, did you hear something or?
Well, I've always been into video games, and I was playing old video games, before people called it retro gaming and thought it was super cool. I had
to us, right.
Old stuff, in the 2000s. I was playing, an NES on a CRT TV, and I'm still doing it. But God, I lost my train of thought. What was the question?
You're saying you've always been into. You said it was a slow progression into doing chiptunes.
Oh yeah, okay. So it was a slow progression of, I've always liked that music. But I think what got me into it was right around like maybe 2013, 2014. I started to like kind of delve into the digital audio workstation that I have, and I noticed, you can kind of get these plugins, and they're like little musical instruments, little software instruments, and I found that this was great because it meant I could work on music at night, because my wife goes to bed, and it's like, okay, I can't make noise, I can't practice my guitar, right now, so it became a way to work on tunes at night, and then it just kind of gradually progressed, became an obsession working with electronic music. And then, I found out, you can do this with old consoles, and I don't need to hear anymore. And I'm like, that's perfect. That's definitely the music that I want to make. I started with, using synthesizers and VST plugins. But as soon as I got a hold of, a Game Boy and a copy of LSDJ, it was like, this is what I want to do.
It was the first snort up the old nose.
Yeah, it definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't get addicted overnight.
Okay.
Definitely took some practice.
So, okay. So, and then of course you've got the classic tune on your channel, Grandma Got Run Over by a Game Boy.
Every Christmas, this is a tradition for a couple of years now. But on my guitar channel, I come out with a Christmas video every year, and then the last couple of years, I came out with a guitar video or ukulele, and now I do an electronic. I do a chiptune, or just electronic. Last year was just electronic. I'll do an electronic version of a Christmas classic. So last year, it was. God, what did I do? I did Feliz Navidad, but with like
the synthwave cover
and 808 and a Juno 60. But this year, yeah, I did Grandma Got Run Over by a
Game Boy.
Reindeer with a Game Boy, entirely with a Game Boy. Yeah.
All right.
And
so, go ahead.
That one I do use the Artiphone on. I used a combination of stuff on that because I did the tracker, I did LSDJ. But when it came time to lay down the lead, I got a MIDI interface for the Nintendo Game Boy, so I can just I can plug the Artiphone into my computer and then have it send MIDI to the Game Boy.
Right. All right. So okay. So finally, like a couple of quick questions. How big is the chiptune scene? As far as I know, there's a lot of people out there doing it, home brewing. I mean, but I'm talking about like live chiptune concerts or something like that. Like what is the scene?
Well, there's
there's
MagFest.
Okay.
MagFest is a huge
Mac with a G or Mac with a C?
Mag with a G.
Okay.
Yeah, MagFest. And God, I hope I'm right about that. I've never been, but I'd love to go.
Look it up. Yeah.
But MagFest is an entire festival dedicated to chiptune. Just like it's like the Comic-Con of chiptune. Popular enough to have more than one podcast for, and I listen to several. I mean, obviously it's not mainstream, but I would say it's fairly popular with kind of a niche audience of maybe gamers or just people who like that sound, or people who are nostalgic for that sound.
Do you see any newer people coming into the scene, or is it just like aging
there's
up?
kids all the time.
Yeah,
There's kids all the time, just because Game Boy is pretty affordable, and or you can do it for free. You can just get a copy of LSDJ, put it on your computer, and just run it in emulation, and it'll work just fine.
Nice.
So yeah, there's kids. It probably does tend to skew older, but there's young people in the scene for sure.
So I did look up MagFest. It is Mag with a G. It stands for Music and Gaming Festival.
Music and Gaming.
Originally the Mid-Atlantic Gaming Festival, and it's held in National Harbor, Maryland. So in 2018, you had 21,000 plus people. That's no small gathering. So is this like a lot of, like with the Amiga scene and a lot of stuff like this, it tends to be bigger in Europe. Would you say that the chiptune scene is bigger in Europe? Or maybe even Japan, since it's relates to video game stuff. Like they literally, if you watch the opening ceremonies for the Olympics this year, the little signs they held announcing each country in the Parade of Nations was in a manga style, and then they played video game music during the Parade of Nations. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's held in higher esteem, culturally. But would you say that the scene is bigger in other countries, or would you say the scene is about as big?
I don't really know. It's got to be big in Europe because a lot of the trackers only work in PAL.
Right.
I have no idea. I know that in Japan, I watched somebody on YouTube get an FM synthesis chip. I think the same one that's in the Sega Genesis. He got it in. Do you remember those machines when you were a kid where you put the quarter in and it spits out like a plastic bubble?
Yeah, and it's got a little thing.
And then you
inside.
have a random toy.
It's got a hotchkey inside. Yeah.
They have that for like sound chips.
What the crap?
Some part in Japan. I watched a guy on YouTube do this.
Surprised, man.
I swear this happened. So it's got to be huge. But I feel like it's anywhere you have a homebrew community, it's going to be big because someone's got to program that music. So that's a person who does chiptunes.
Right.
So there's a lot of games made in Japan. There's a lot of games made in Europe. There's a lot of games made in the U.S. I don't know where it's bigger or smaller. It's got to be big overseas, but it's big enough in the U.S. that we can host something like MagFest.
Yeah, that's cool.
And 21,000 people come over. So, does that translate to top 40 radio play? Hell no. But
right. But we're probably not going to play it during LA's Parade of Nations when they have the Olympics.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah,
but I imagine there's huge scenes wherever old video games are popular, which seems to be just about anywhere.
All right, last couple of questions here. So, as a musician, what has been the hardest part of getting into chiptunes, and what's been the best part?
The hardest part is learning the new hardware, learning how it works, learning how the trackers work, learning how to do sound design, how to get the chip to do different sounds. That's the hardest part. And then what was the second part?
What's been the best part as a musician?
What's been the best?
Yeah.
Just the reaction, just that, I made some stuff and I'm sure my parents hate it and wonder why they helped me through college with a music degree only to make bleepy bloops.
In a Cobra Commander mask or helmet.
But the reaction from friends,
from peers,
and peers has been really positive. And
I like it. I like your stuff, so
I enjoy making it. So just that's what it's mostly about, though, is did I enjoy making this? If someone likes it, that's a nice bonus. But I'm still gonna make it regardless, just because it's super fun. I can spend entire days just lost in a tracker.
There you go. Right, that's the thing. Getting lost in something you love. Like I said, Shane Plays Geek Talk is a journey into the things we love. So people are passionate about stuff. So Matt Lister, aka Cobra Commander, will bleep and blop you, and you will like it. You will enjoy those boops. So final question. Do you want to give a couple of shout outs to people in the scene that you think are amazing? Yeah, I know you've already mentioned Pixel Pedant.
Oh, yeah, sure. I love
Luke
Hash. Yeah. Luke Hash is amazing. Chipsel is amazing. Check out her stuff. Okay. God, who else? Defense Mechanism. God, I can't talk today. Defense Mechanism is amazing. Let me see who else. Oh, there's a woman I follow named Kemixiel. It's KEMIKZIEL, and she has a Twitch channel where she makes LSDJ tunes on a Game Boy Live, and it's absolutely brilliant. It has taught me so much.
Learn a lot, yeah.
It has taught me so much. I ended up donating to her Patreon because I think I learned so much from watching her, her do it. And there's some real educators in the scene too. She's great. Defense Mechanism, I learned a ton of stuff from him too. He's absolutely fantastic.
Well, your Cobra Commander is pretty good. You might want to check him out too. So,
and for the classic stuff, I would say listen to Rob Hubbard, because Rob
Hubbard, okay,
yeah, he's a genius, just the perfect mix of brilliant musician and brilliant programmer. And he made, he made some of the most iconic chiptune stuff. The soundtrack to Commando for the Commodore 64. Is the stuff of legends. The guy I know the most, and I'll put that in the notes, but the guy I know the most, and it's mainly because of my friend Matt Barton, who does video game developer interviews. He has super high regard for a guy named George Sanger, aka the Fat Man, and George Sanger evidently did like a lot of well-known and important video game music as well. So I don't know if you ever heard of him, but Matt has some interviews with him in super high regard. All right, man. Well, I got to wrap us up. I appreciate your passion, enthusiasm, and your time. And people, when you listen to this, I always do show notes at shaneplays.com for each episode, but I really recommend you go this time because there's going to be all kinds of links and stuff in the show notes for, stuff we've talked about. But so I got to do this to you, Matt Lister, aka Cobra Commander. Every episode, I do a bad joke of the week. That's how we finish. So I sent you the waiver. I don't know if you signed it or not, but we'll just go ahead and press on, and I'll just hope my lawyers are good enough. So it's the bad joke of the week. Here we go. I picked this one out just for you, Matt. Are you ready? Yeah, go for it.
What has a metal head and sets in a rocker?
Has a metal head. I have no idea.
Destro's grandmother.
It's great. It's great. It's a winner.
Yeah, and now you know, and knowing
is half the battle.
Yeah, yes, sir. That is correct. Ding, 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 ding. All right, Matt. I really appreciate it. Folks, go check out Matt Lister, a.k.a. Cobra Commander's stuff on his YouTube channel. And when do you think that your album might drop there, Matt?
I'm at this rate because I'm doing it all on my lunch break because I'm crazy.
2072.
No, I'm wrapping up the 7th track.
Yeah.
I'd like it to have at least 12 tracks, so it should be out in early 2022.
All right. Well, let me know. I'll support it. So.
Thanks.
All right, man. Well, man, I appreciate it. Have fun with all your hardware and trackers and all your crazy transistor radios and stuff, and and have fun with your, what is it, the Trackmaster? What is that thing called? The Trackformer, dude.
Let's just call it the Millennium Falcon, because that's what it is.
It's the Millennium. It's the Millennium Merlin, the Merlin Falcon. Yeah.
It's the only instrument to make the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs.
Yeah. So, all right, man. We'll catch you later. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks again for your time, and keep having fun with all that chiptune stuff. And you've taught me a lot. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Awesome.
Awesome. All right, man. Thanks so much for listening to Shane Plays Geek Talk. I certainly hope you enjoyed this journey into the things we love. For your convenience, show notes with helpful links for each episode can always be found at shaneplays.com. You can catch the podcast in several places, including on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, Amazon Music, Verbal, YouTube, and more. Shane Plays is also carried on SciFi.radio. SciFi.radio is sci-fi for your Wi-Fi. SciFi.radio.com. If you like what you hear and would like to support Shane Plays Geek Talk, you can do so for as little as $1 per episode on Patreon at patreon.com/ShanePlays. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Stay geeky, my friends.